Hello, welcome back to One Leg at a Time, the podcast about health, wellness, music, and recovery, in which I, Dr. Dean Anbar, interview other musicians and creatives about their process, their priorities, and the things that they do to achieve their goals. Today's interview is with practicing therapist and fellow person in recovery, Dr. Andrew Goldberg. And this is a really insightful conversation. It was great to hear what he had to say about the things that he prioritizes, what he includes in his practice, what he does in his personal life. Drew's a great guy. We used to live together. We spent a lot of time catching up and we had a lot of fun. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, anywhere that you get your podcasts. And thanks for watching this week's conversation with Dr. Andrew Goldberg.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing good. I was going to say, every time I see you, and I've been going over this in my head too, I get this earworm that repeats in my head every time. I just hear dental plan, Lisa needs braces, dental plan. And so if this part of the clip makes it on, like, can I talk to the audience while we're talking, or is that breaking the wall or something?
No, talk to the audience.
Yeah. Talk to the audience. Because what people don't know, or the audience might not know, I don't know how much you preface this in preparation.
No one knows anything about anything.
No shit. So it's like, to the audience, we used to live together. But before we lived together, like, we were strangers.
Well, that's kind of how it goes. Before two people know each other, they're strangers.
They're strangers, yeah. It was just so funny. Where did we meet? Was it the Nexus of the Universe? Is that what, the Krishna meeting?
So my memory is that I had met not at Nexus of the Universe, but at another. It was through him that I met you. I think he was just like, oh, my buddy Drew lives in Stuytown, and then we met. It could have been vice versa, though. But because I remember going to that meeting that was like up at the VA hospital on 23rd.
Oh, yeah.
Before going to the Nexus of the Universe meeting.
The Nexus? I have no idea. I just remember meeting you, and you had really long hair, and you were a little bit heavier set. You look great, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah,
you've always looked great, though. You've always managed to keep it very tight, very svelte. Well, your Semitic charms.
It's the least I can do for myself.
I mean, we're gonna get into all that, but wasn't it fun to be like a young, sober person in New York City?
Yeah, if there was a place to be young and sober, it was New York. That was absolutely crazy.
It was awesome. Like, drinking in New York City was not as fun as being sober in New York City. And I can say that having done both,
Yeah.
And I always lamented, because, when you get sober young, like we did, I always felt like I was missing out on something fundamental to, like, the college experience and then just the mid-20s experience, that when I did start drinking, it was like the initial just excitement of feeling like I had a pass to do this now was so disproportionate to what it actually was, which was just, I'm drinking at a bar. Who gives a fuck? But, like, it felt like my life could start finally,
Yeah.
Which now, looking back on it in retrospect, is like, that's clearly alcoholic thinking. But I could not see the forest for that tree at the time. All it was like, oh, I don't have to be burdened by sobriety anymore. And then now when I think about it, 10, 15 years after the fact, I'm like, we had so much fun, man. We had so much fun just being dumb and, like, without the risk of consequence, like the things that I then started to learn happen as a result of drinking, like that, you can't really see it for what it is either until it's after the fact, It's
so none of it was like fulfilling what the fantasy actually was, because, like, being in New York, especially in sober, there's this whole other aspect of New York that, like, the underbelly of it, that you can only really know if you're getting fucked up, or at least engaging in that lifestyle, which we weren't really a part of. But so was any of that there? Because I did feel a little alone or a little separated from an aspects of New York that, we see glorified in movies.
Okay. I want to get into this with you. I've been talking to musicians what they deal with and how they kind of manage it and also achieve their goals in the music industry, because it's really hard and I'm interested in it as somebody who's doing those things. So now you have a unique perspective on this because you are a musician. You're also a practicing psychologist and therapist. We've known each other for a very long time, and I think it's fair to say that you're comfortable talking about the fact that you are in recovery.
just a hair. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So thank God we got that out of the way. So now we're talking about, because my history, and the audience isn't going to know this until now, I was introduced to 12-step recovery when I was 18 years old. That was the first time I had direct consequences as a result of my young idiot self being a drug guy. And at the time,
wait, this is the first time you're telling your audiences too? They don't know this yet?
They don't know anything about me other than the fact that I play music and I'm in recovery. But the biographical parts of it, I mean, it just hasn't really come up.
Oh, okay. I'm honored. I'm glad this. Yeah. Anyways, go continue. I apologize.
No, not at all. I mean, so that's what happened. And then I so strongly identified with what I heard as an 18-year-old in 12-step meetings that I was just like, this is everything I've been looking for. I've felt so lost my whole life. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to articulate the kinds of feelings or the type of loneliness that I felt or isolation. And all of a sudden, I'm listening to people who are, in some cases, twice my age or have just gone through like these experiences I can't even begin to comprehend, but they're telling me things about how they feel that are exactly how I feel that nobody else has said before. So I'm in, right? I'm hooked. And I spent the next 7 years sober and in 12-step recovery, which is where I met you. So now we're talking about, you got sober around the same time, right? How old were you?
20.
You were 20. We were young.
Yeah.
I left. I said, I'm done with being sober. I'm old enough. I'm 25. I can have a beer.
You broke up with AA.
I had my first breakup with the AA at that time. And my experience with it was not what I was expecting. The world didn't crumble, like things didn't just blow up in my face. I felt great. And I felt like, and I just had a couple. I think the first time I just had one. I think I nursed like a Pilsner for like 3 hours. I was very careful. But I felt like that gave me everything that I needed to know at that time, that I wasn't actually an alcoholic, that I was just a depressed kid, that my drug problems when I was a kid were far blown out of proportion because nobody knew how to deal with a kid like me and blah, blah, blah. Which,
right. All that fear mongering and shit that they were saying in AA, it's not true. I'm fine.
Which could have been the case.
It is for some.
It is for some. It wasn't for me, but it took a while to get there. And so we were talking about one of the things that I was experiencing was this feeling, because I was sober all through college and all through grad school and those first few years that we lived in New York City together. And we were talking about how much fun it was to be sober in New York as a young person, because it was the places we had meetings, the places we hung out, the things that we did. It was just like, it felt so free. Completely liberated from anything. And there was no pressure to be cool. We would go to dances in weird churches. Like everyone else is going to these nightclubs and stuff. We're like literally hanging out
churches.
Kool-Aid at a church. I mean, that sounds culty. But that's
a little bit. But it was fun. Yeah, it was innocent fun.
And then when I did start drinking, because it was drinking first, and I started messing around with pot and whatever, as you do,
as one does.
What I felt like was redemption in the sense that I could finally have a life, a normal young person's life,
Well, we also fantasize what it would be like. We see, I saw this stuff on TV and in movies, like this aspect, especially about you being in New York, or both of us, what life would be like going to these parties, doing drugs, and just this, I don't know, just this complete rush of just fun.
Totally. Well, it was exotic. It was like, I couldn't do it. And because you were telling yourself you can't do this thing, there is a little bit of a taboo mystery about it. I can say now, having done it, it was fine. It was just like anything else, you know. Sometimes you go and get like a hummus and pita, and sometimes you do Molly at a party in a loft. Like in looking back on it, those are both great things, and one isn't cooler or better than the other. It just depends on how you feel about it.
So it's unremarkable. It wasn't like, given the level of consequences having addiction issues is, it's kind of not worth doing.
Yeah, and I think the difference is that it's a lot easier to romanticize even the consequences, right? Like, oh, I got so sick because I drank so much and I, did this or whatever. It's like there is, I don't know why that is, but it certainly is my experience. I really thought that because of my experience, and I wonder what you would speak to this, because I think about it still a lot, but for different reasons. Having fundamentally grown up in 12-step, I felt like with those tools still a part of me, even when I stopped being a part of actual, the recovery community and started experimenting with substances, I felt like I kind of had a way out. I felt like that was enough. The fact that I knew how to do that was like, I was okay,
I'm a more evolved being. I can handle this.
Yeah,
the self-awareness will take me.
But that obviously wasn't the case. What are you up to these days? You're still going to meetings?
Occasionally. I mean, I do. Well, it's good to hear first like that. This big mystery, or like what we fantasize about, it doesn't really deliver. Maybe for some, but like anything, like it's just the level of consequences doesn't justify the experiences. It's not like the fantasy we see, like maybe moments, but they flicker and then they're gone, and it's just not really worth it. And I read a lot of books, well, not a lot, like maybe one or two, about, like some like these now Buddhists, but they were addicts first, and they'd be like, oh, well, I go on these 10-day silent retreats, and then I'm getting drunk, but I'm being mindful of being drunk, and so I can do this self-deception.
There's a lot of that here in California too. There's a lot of Cali sober people. You do what works for you, right? I know for myself that what starts to happen when I self-medicate in any capacity, I'll always seek the easier, softer way. I always like to say, when I discovered long distance running, like the thing that I found was I was treating that like a drug, and I was essentially running myself into oblivion so that I could then spend a day laid out on the couch, all blissed out, and not do anything. I am a true endorphin junkie.
That's the unfortunate or fortunate thing about having addiction, is like that we feel things intensely, or like there's just, intensely. Like if humans on a normal bell curve, like people who are normal, and we're a couple standard deviations away from what's normal. Or on average, because like,
what's normal to you? How would you classify normal with your background?
So I will use, and this is by all means not marketing, one of my inventions, but so here's the thing I call a focus frame, right? So it's a thing filled with glitter. Normal, somebody gets like cut off in traffic, or an email from like their boss that might not be the most pleasant. Maybe like a regular person might experience it like this. A little kick up in emotions, not much. You leave it alone, it goes down. For us, I think we experience life a little bit more intensely. And it takes a lot longer for things to calm down. Hence why alcohol and drugs, like there's a genetic component to addiction. Like over half of what it can account for addiction is genes. There's a model called the diathesis stress model, where it's just like we all have a predisposition to addiction. Like how we all have certain people have predisposition to addiction, just like how we all have predispositions to cancer. If enough factors in the environment like interplay with each other, like boom, addiction happens, right? Or like, oh, all of a sudden these cancer cells turn on. I think that's how it works. I don't know. There's a lot of things I forget. But like with us, we live life on the edge, we experience things intensely, and then when you take that away, when we get sober, because the alcohol, the drugs helped for a period of time, things still are super fucking challenging. Sobriety is not easy, as like you could attest to.
Sobriety is not easy. I will say, in my experience, the consequences that I experienced from that second round, and then getting re-sober again at however old I was, 36, I guess.
36 years old? Jeez, man, we're getting there.
I mean, that was 3 years ago. So
right.
Probably.
I mean, as a side note, it's amazing. Yeah. Aging's so cool. My body hates it. But just as an experience, like to get here, it's wild.
Okay, I have so many things I want to touch back on.
Write it down.
I'm curious. That's what I should be doing, is taking notes. I have a question, only just because I'm curious. I'm the only person in my family, so it seems, who is an addict the way that I am an addict.
Mm-hmm.
So where does the genetic, like, that's not to say that there aren't other people in my family who have their fun, and they know who they are. But I'm just curious, when you were talking about the genetic predisposition, like, why me, and how did that occur? Was it really just like that magic concoction of my personality, the way that I grew up, who my specific parents were at that place and time, going through the experiences that I had, forged this person to be the addict that I am? Is that kind of the deal?
That's what they say.
Mm.
Like, I mean, I'm not a geneticist. I don't do the research, so like I don't know. That's just what the experts say. I mean, like for me, for instance, there's only one other person that we can identify in my family that had alcoholism. It was my grandma, who passed away from cirrhosis in her 40s. And so if I look closely, I could see like my brother has OCD, like the different characteristics. Like addiction's kind of like OCD. There's the obsessiveness and compulsion to use. It's just like, again, like every human has aspects of addiction, except just how many standard deviations are you from the norm. How we diagnose people is that everyone has like borderline bipolar traits or whatever. We all experience some sort of like what you can categorize. It's that when it becomes dysfunctional, we can no longer function in society and start to have these negative consequences, is when we start to categorize, oh, this is addiction. This crosses this threshold.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, and I guess in a certain sense, it doesn't even really matter to try to like figure out where it comes from, but more just so how to treat it.
Exactly.
'Cause I remember when I was in rehab too, like there was one of the counselors in particular was really hell bent on like the connection between trauma and addiction, and kind of kept pushing us to like admit to trauma. And I was like, yeah, I mean, listen, shit was weird at times. Like this is not that podcast, but like we can get into the way that I grew up and frame it in the sense of like, oh, poor me, victim. But I don't know, because like my sister grew up just a couple of years behind me, and she essentially experienced the same circumstances that I did, and she's not an alcoholic or a drug addict,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just interesting. So I guess it doesn't even really matter.
No, I mean, an old teacher of mine used to say, like, addiction's not our fault. It's our responsibility, but it's not like we looked in ourselves in the mirror when we were young and be like, oh, we're going to become fucking drug addicts now. Or how we know, like, PTSD, the only reason why we, like, rediscovered how we treat it is, two people go off to war. They experience horrendous shit. One comes back fine, or relatively fine. The other one is completely like out of it.
Right.
What did that person do who was okay? And how did that, I guess I'm talking more about how we treat things, but it's like everyone can be exposed to the exact same thing and have a different response. It's like,
I remember reading the studies about the soldiers who had come back from Vietnam, and the staggering number of them. It was like something like 50% of the Vietnam vets had experimented with heroin while they were over there. And then
I don't blame them.
It was only like
if I could do it responsibly, I'd use it every day.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh.
But only like let's say that it was 50% of the people who were there were experimenting. Only like 5% of people actually like became heroin addicts by the time they were home and the war was done. So it's not everybody who takes it is a junkie. Not everybody who gets a prescription after their dental surgery or whatever,
exactly.
Goes and
grandma broke her hip. She's not an addict.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but she could be, but
yeah.
So it is interesting, and it always kind of fascinates me. before music, it was fantasy books and like drawing. You know, I was just like totally, and sugar. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
That's another thing I've spoken to with different people is like my food addiction.
You can just umbrella it all under consumption, like whether it's drugs, it's food, it's media, it's this. Like what, what are we consuming? Even thoughts. What thoughts am I consuming?
Totally. Yeah. Social media. My God. Most of the relationships that I have with people who are, you know, my peers in recovery are just like, I don't have time to fucking think about this.
And all I want to do is think about it. Like I'm having fights with people in meetings because being like, I don't know if you ever want to get into this. Like I'm like I cause waves sometimes in AA because like I think it's outdated and we're doing people a disservice out of willful ignorance. Well, I don't think it's malicious, but I just think it's troublesome on the state of AA and where we're going to go in terms of like this community support. I think it's dwindling in numbers, and I blame a part of it on just our inability to update.
Talk about like update how. I have thoughts on this too. I'm curious where and what you think about.
Yeah. Well, just like put it in perspective. Cognitive behavioral therapy. This is one of the like, you know, really things about therapy. Didn't get invented until the 70s. Mm-hmm. Addiction treatment that we know of didn't really take off until the 1980s. That book was written in the 30s. Even Bill thought like, hey, 15 years later, this big book thing is not as simple and straightforward as possible. This is our program in print, and it's supposed to help people, and yet we have to really decipher what is going on. What are they really trying to say here? I'm all confused. Even he tried to update it, and then even now to today, we have 80 years of understanding of therapy, addiction treatment, and yet very little bit, except for pamphlets, a sprinkling of pamphlets that we don't even really engage with. They just sit on the side, are actually a part of AA. Mm. There's courts around the country like that have a rule. It is unconstitutional to mandate somebody to AA because of the religious aspects of it. They say even though they say they're not religious, there's enough in their text. You just read it.
Yeah.
And especially the steps to make it that way. And not saying that God is wrong or religion is necessarily wrong. I have my own gripes about religion. Mm-hmm. It's just that you can't mandate somebody to something that's religious. And one last thing, there's a pamphlet called Questions and Answers on Sponsorship. And on page 21, it says, if a sponsee, a newcomer, is resistant against a spiritual or religious aspect of the program, what should they do? And it says a couple things, and then the last sentence of the paragraph is like, rest assured, there are many people who get sober without any relationship or belief in a higher power. Mm-hmm. So even AA is saying this is not a necessary condition to get sober.
Right.
So if you don't have to believe in a higher power, doesn't you question that maybe the steps need to change?
I didn't have any trouble. I think the hippiness in me was sort of like quick to be able to say, okay, well, God doesn't mean God the way that you think it means God. Like, I'm cool with flower power, spirit of the universe, God. I don't need to be convinced of that. So like, I'll just roll with it. You know, I've experienced enough mystery and wonderment in my life. Like I don't need. Okay. I think it's interesting to hear you say that. I have other thoughts about, because, you know, I'm not advocating for anything. I don't advocate for anybody to have to be sober. I really like whenever people, because this comes up a lot because of what I do and where I tend to work, which is like bars and shit. And every now and again, people will be like, what are you drinking? I'll be like, well, I'm not drinking. Why aren't you drinking? The conversations do happen from time to time. And then it'll be, oh, I'm sober. People start saying, oh yeah, I shouldn't, or I should, or whatever. And it's just like, I don't care. I mean, I'm not, if you feel like you need help, like that's a different story.
Yeah, go
like,
get some help. Yeah.
This isn't just like a time for you to start telling me your life story. Like but
it always seems to happen that way. It's like, you're not drinking. It's like people feel like, oh, this is my time. Like it's so fun when that happens.
You do what you do.
Yeah.
I do believe that the way that the substance culture has changed, and especially over the last decade, where we have these incredibly strong drugs that creep their way into all different types of things. Like, it's a very dangerous time to be experimenting, and it's a very dangerous time to relapse. Like, it's so easy for people to just die. It's a lot easier, I think, than it used to be. And I do look at, harm reduction strategy and harm prevention strategies, and where younger version of me might have been like, no, they're not sober, they, whatever. Like, now it's just like, no, there needs to be room for all method. If smoking weed helps you not take the fentanyl that's going to kill you, smoke the weed. If being on a long taper of Suboxone for the rest of your life is going to help you, stay on it. I don't know. I mean, you should try to get off it. And if you actively want to get off it, then we can talk,
Right.
It's a real thing.
People have opinions, and it's I to harp back with the program and why I'm very passionate about it, because you need community support. It's true, real recovery, even with the mental and emotional health. And I will die on this hill. I think mental health is a misnomer. It needs to be updated to mental and emotional. Just because when people hear the word mental, we think it's here, and it's really mind, body, emotion. It's a whole system, and we need to start
back on that.
Conceptualizing it.
This will help me clarify when I have my conversations with musicians too, because that's the whole thing about this podcast is. And the genesis of it was my experience sort of being, newly sober again, but also as a musician, as somebody finishing my doctorate, and as somebody who wanted to just get through it. And also the other things that were going on at the time, going through the divorce and just just a whole lot of things were happening. And I found myself on the other side of it going, that was crazy. This is where I'm at now. And I'm looking at the people around me going, I'm not the only one who struggles. Maybe I'm the only one who I know who struggled like this, but that's not to say that other people don't have stories. And that's what I want to get into. So the whole sort of thesis of the show was and is mental health, physical health, recovery, but recovery is sort of a blanket term. Mm-hmm. So you're saying mental health and emotional health.
Yeah, mental and emotional. It's because we can't think our way. It's not always about thinking your way through things. People come into session, and sometimes a session can have very few words in it, and it's very somatic base, where we're getting to the body and emotions. And I think it's just conceptually taking things out of the head and start to acknowledge there's this emotional part. Just semantics is important. When we say God, the reason why I have a problem with trying to do the mental gymnastics around God in AA is that, God's a complicated word, just like the word love. When I say I love my mom, it's much different when I say I love cookies. So when we start to talk about God, everyone's a different relationship. And if it was a necessary component to get sober, if tens of thousands of people over the years couldn't get sober because they didn't believe in God, then it's fine. Do it that way. But because people don't, and they get sober, and even AA admits it, we need to change the languaging. Yeah. And plus, it's a free community thing. As a therapist, 1 hour of therapy a week for most people is just not going to cut it unless they have a support system. Mm-hmm. Because real therapy happens as you integrate it into your life. The name of my practice is This Moment, Be Your Own Therapist. And to be your own therapist, you're basically learning the skills I use for myself and I teach to clients in a multitude of ways. That's a collaboration. And so they know how to help themselves. And sometimes being your own therapist means, shit, I don't have this. I need to reach out for help.
All right. So I'm just curious about your practice and what you do now. So you are a musician. And when we met, I feel, you were a guitar player.
Yes.
And that's part of your practice now too, right?
To a degree. I mean, I don't play guitar in practice. My whole shtick is I do music meditation, but it's not any kind of music meditation. It's it's meditating to your own music. Now, if you make your own music, that's great. That's a whole different story, an aspect of it. But it's the music that you like, that you love from throughout your life up until now. Because mindfulness is about understanding yourself. What are my triggers? What are my values? I get distracted. How do I bring myself back? And what is this thing that's triggering me? Somebody sends me an email I don't like. Why is that causing this, this chaos inside me? And how do I respond to it? What is going on here? It's not about relaxing, clearing your mind, getting all zen and shit. Like when they talk about Buddhism and enlightenment isn't a lobotomy. Enlightenment is the Buddha still experienced emotions, was still a fucking human being. He just was able to understand what triggered him and how to respond more skillfully. That's it.
Did you say enlightenment isn't a lobotomy?
No, it's not. No, people think about it. The only reason why Buddhism, in my opinion, comes off as like this enlightenment, like you are above it all. It's just so the Buddha could sell more books. It's to get people through the door. Meditation sucks. It is hard to sit there and watch your breath for 30 minutes. It's horribly uncomfortable. And people think like, well, I did it. That sucked. I'm never doing this again. I got sold like a bag of lies. Like, screw it. Meditation's hard. These practices were invented a couple thousand years ago, super helpful, but no one sits in silence and watches their breath. And it takes a long time of consistently sitting and feeling discomfort and be able to stay with it within reason, because things start to get a little complicated on like, is this something I sit through, or do I open my eyes and start to look around? Do I practice? Do I not? How to navigate that space? But it's not about being zenned out. I can tell you that much.
Do you have any experience with transcendental meditation?
Not personally. I mean, I know of it and like the mantra base to it, but yeah.
I did it and it was an interesting experience because even the name transcendental meditation, you know, like that name alone, and plus the people who were, you know, kind of hawking it, I was in. I wanted to transcend. I seek transcendence in all aspects of my life. It's been, I kind of, you know, especially when I was doing more of the long distance running, I kind of was treating that as my meditation. They're not one and the same.
Right. It depends on the intention. Like when I sit and practice mindfulness specifically, it's with the intention to like, you know, reduce my suffering and in ways of like, how is my mental, emotional, how am I living in this world, like causing me suffering, and how is it not? And so I only really know that it's like I'm watching my breath, my mind goes somewhere else. And when I realize it, I wake up to the distraction, I connect to the next moment. And I just do that over and over. So then I become aware of like, oh, there's sadness inside right now, or there's anger, or there's joy right now. And so when I'm out in the world and I get distracted by something or I get triggered, it's like, oh, now it's like this. It's like this awareness of like how it's all unfolding, and I can choose to respond rather than just automatically react.
Yeah. Because this is the difference. When I was running and I was, you know, tacking on mileage because I wanted to get better at running longer distances, and I would have the thought, my mind is more powerful than anything that's going on with how I feel physically right now. And I remember there was a quote that I'm not going to lie, I heard it on the season finale or the series finale of The Good Place, where
Love
she
that show.
says, oh, so good. And when she says, you know, the Buddhists believe that, or I forget who says it, but, you know, something about like you're a wave in the water. And when you're on Earth, that's one way for the wave to be. And when you're not on Earth anymore, the wave returns back to the water, and it's all still water. And I'd be running by the ocean and I'd be thinking, however I'm feeling right now, if I'm in any kind of discomfort or pain or whatever, like this is just one way that my wave is, you know, I will return back to not being hurting, you know, and sure enough, after a couple of seconds, I wouldn't have that pain anymore. And I remember thinking, and these are the thoughts that were running through my head. I've gone through opiate withdrawal like 100 times. I can keep putting one foot in front of the other. I'm stronger than this. You know, I've proven to myself I can handle. And then to take that a step further, the fact that I can run, considering how sick I've been in my past and made myself this sick, now I owe it to myself to go on the flip side of this. Be strong, like fulfill this because you can. The fact that you can means that you should. Like that's what I was telling myself. Yeah. And those, in a way, are meditation. But I wouldn't say that they're the same types of meditation as what you're saying, which is identifying. If anything, I'm kind of going like, no, like it's a strengthening, you know, of a different type. But regardless,
You're having just very similar insights. I don't know. I mean, like the way you explained it right there, it's kind of like, I mean, like I remember a teacher of mine would say the only reason why we value sitting meditation over walking meditation is because we couldn't make a statue of Buddha walking. Like I don't know, but it's similar shit. Like Pema Chodron says, like you are the sky, everything else is just weather. So like, hey, right now it's raining, but the weather will pass. Right now it's like snowing, or it's a storm, or it's this, or it's this, and then like the changing of the seasons.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but with the music, just to touch on that one, like seeing that people struggle with the entryway into mindfulness and like how it just takes repeated practice. I was trying to figure out a way, how I could be in grad school and just concentrate mostly on music and the things that I wanted to other than class, because I fucking hated school.
Mm-hmm.
I was the ADHD kid who got in tons of trouble and like failed out. My relationship
we should talk about ADHD. I often wonder if it's worth pursuing a diagnosis.
Maybe we could talk about it. We could talk about it. But so I was sitting in class, and like, if mindfulness is about understanding yourself and yada yada yada, why is mindfulness or meditation music this one way? Because I find meditation music very irritating, and I started to think about, well, I love blues music, and finger-picking blues music from the 1930s makes me feel happy whenever I listen to it. I felt this joy. Makes no sense. These people are singing about post-slave era, like being downtrodden in the 30s before in the South. I'm some Jewish kid that grew up in the 90s in like Cleveland, Ohio. I know nothing about it. And like, it made me feel connected. Yeah. And like, it brought me that joy. Now, why blues, like finger-picking blues? I have no idea. That's the magic of music. Though now I know that whenever I'm feeling lonely or like, this type of disconnected, I listen to that and it helps me. Mm-hmm. And now I know, because of my mindfulness practice, whenever I feel like, I want to listen to some Mississippi John Hurt, am I in some way feeling these feelings? Because it's connected. Mm-hmm. Our music has emotions. Our music has memories. Those memories have emotions. The more we connect with the music that makes our hearts sing, the more awareness we have of ourselves. And so I did 2 research studies on this, and I showed that you can meditate to heavy metal. Doesn't matter about genre, doesn't matter about style. It just matters your personal relationship to that music, and you will get the same stress-reducing effects as mindfulness. But the only thing that's better is you enjoy the process a little bit more, because you're listening to your favorite music. You're listening to music that you choose.
Yeah. Meditation music, the only thing I've ever found it good for is tripping my fucking balls.
Yes.
And that's about it.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, unless you like to all those listeners, if you like meditation music.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not trying to yuck your yum here.
Yeah.
All right, that's cool. Yeah, because I've seen you on your social media kind of like posting or promoting this music and I guess music meditation thing that you're doing, but I never really had a chance to talk to you about it. So that seems like a really cool way to do it. And it certainly rings true with my experience.
Well, I mean, like being a therapist, trying to get people to meditate. It's like, listen, 5 minutes of mindfulness, yada, yada, yada. The best way to build a habit is take what somebody's already doing and then just modifying, building off of that. People who like music, you're listening to music anyways. That's an amazing inroad to start to add some like mindfulness techniques and like skills to relationship, because you're doing that already. So you're more likely to incorporate this therapeutic practice. During the pandemic, my friends and I tried to make an app where we overlaid this meditation instructions, both visually and audio, with music, but copyright, Spotify shut us down, so that kind of sucked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does suck. I guess you could now. I think you can do it through Spotify itself, right? And like you can get the licensing that way.
We're trying to use the API, but you couldn't do it commercially, even though like we're basically giving it away for free, but because it wasn't for personal use. No, I don't do this. Like, dude, I do like free workshops. No one shows up. That's the funniest thing. Like I was doing these things, like I have one of my flyers like out of larder and stuff like that, just to be like, let's come in, let's share. We all meditate to our music. You have this access, like spattering of people. Like it's hard to,
No, but you do it because it's valuable.
We can get as morbid as we want and talk about how doubt will talk us out of everything. And this is too fucking intense. However, like we're here, life is good to a degree, but it's not without its challenges. And paradoxically, accepting that actually helps keep things more on a simmer rather than boiling.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see this, but
I can't. I just see your beautiful face.
Sherlock has been trying to get my attention for like the last 20 minutes. He's so funny.
Little buddy.
Yeah, buddy. He's a big buddy. I wrote down like 50 questions, and I was looking for cards that had legs on them because the show is called One Leg at a Time.
Yeah, I like that.
Find legs, but what I do have are feet.
This is great.
So what I've been doing is having people pick a foot and answer a question. Now, obviously, since in different cities, if you want, I can pick a foot at random, and we can see what's on the card, and you can answer it.
Are they color coordinated?
They're not.
Okay, well then never mind then.
Pick a color. You got
all right, green.
Green. All right.
Is green a color?
Green.
There's a good Pink Floyd song. Green is the favorite color. Green is the color.
Green is the first color. This is a great question for you. Who was your first bad influence?
Probably myself. I mean, I was the kind of like forerunner of everything. Well, not everything, but like I was the one who did drugs first. I was the one like, I was usually the bad influence because I was the ADHD kid who's like, what's that shiny thing? I want to try this out.
Yeah, but where'd you get them?
I remember like the day 6th grade got out, like this kid, Blake, I was at some party. He's like, do you want to buy some weed? I'm like, no. He's like, then like later, he's like, do you want to get high? I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said yes, but the person who got me into the bad shit, because I was a hippie, I was into Jimi Hendrix, and I was only like natural drugs and acid. Anything else, nothing. I'm not going to do it.
Acid's
my friend. My friend comes over, Aaron. We're 16 years old. Speaking about pharmacy, he traded some girl like half an eighth of weed. He raided her dad's medicine cabinet. Her dad was a surgeon. So this goes to show you like the problem in the suburbs is that like, we have these parents who are well off who just have pharmacies and their kids are taking it from them.
Yeah.
So this kid gave him like a whole like plethora of like Oxycontin and morphine and this. And he's like, you have to try this. I'm like, no, I'm only into mushrooms. And he's like, you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would like to say I was more resistant to the convincing. I had more conviction at that time. I probably fought back like once. I'm like, yeah, it didn't take long. I took it. It was the most amazing thing. We watched Requiem for a Dream, which was very foretelling. First time doing opiates. We're watching Requiem.
Well, because
and then we went to go see
the best you've ever felt in your life. And so you're watching this movie, you're just like, that sucks for them. Like,
right. Yeah. It's not going to happen to me until it happens to me.
Right. I tell you this, the first time I ever understood the power of opiate drugs was actually not through that friend. I was younger. I think it was in 7th grade. And it was because I was this little sugar junkie and my parents they didn't keep anything good in the house. So like the closest that we had was like sugar-free cookies or like just awful,
Yeah.
So I would always be raiding the cabinets, just looking for something, right? Just anything good. And I would drink things like NyQuil and cough syrup, right? Because it was sweet. It was sugar.
Yeah, a lot of sugar. Yeah.
And I remember my mom, she used to always have like a chronic pain, some kind of like a chronic cough or something.
Just a little tickle.
I don't know, something like that. She would lose her voice a lot. So she had this codeine cough syrup. And I remember taking a swig of it before school. And just like, I didn't know what it was. All I know is I showed up that day feeling the best I've ever felt in my life. And I was just like, wait, that was from the cough syrup? Like, this is incredible, And that really was the introduction. But I didn't know anybody else who had that stuff. But, eventually you're smart, you're resourceful, you start reading labels, you kind of put some of the pieces together.
Exactly. You know what's good and what's not. How old were you when that happened?
13? 12?
Do you like, I can't even imagine like seeing these kids now. It's like, what the fuck was I doing? Like, oh my God, why didn't anybody stop me? When people tried.
Well, nobody was really paying attention that way because I didn't want them to. I mean, also because I knew like I couldn't ask for candy at the house because it was already like there was off limits. I would look for quarters under the sofa. I would go down to the corner store and I would buy like a bag of marshmallows and eat the whole bag on the walk between the corner store and the house.
Jesus.
Couldn't be any contraband. Like it was that type of I had to hide it. I don't know. I always have conflicting feelings about whether or not the restriction. I always was gonna want the sugar. I was really into sugar, The fact that it wasn't in the house, did that make me want it more? Was I just gonna gravitate towards it either way? I remember having this thought when I was in probably 5th grade. So I was at a friend of mine's house who their parents let them have candy. There was like a big bowl of M&Ms. I remember eating a big bowl of M&Ms and being sick to my stomach. And I had this, you tell me this isn't an alcoholic thought. If I had known I was going to be that sick from the M&Ms, I would have eaten more M&Ms.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm 10 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's a shadow laugh, but it's also sad, like what was going on in Little Dean's, like,
oh, come on. I just liked it.
Well, yes, that, but also the sugar, like the seeking, the like all that stuff, like I don't know whether the restriction's the way to go, whether it's something else, whether it's in between. We'll never know. We can't access a parallel universe, We don't know what.
No, but all right. So you were the catalyst for your own destruction. Very interesting.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there's people who were there and help move it along.
Facilitate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't do it alone. My big rationalization was like, I'm not an alcoholic or drug. I get high with people all the time, except I was getting high before and after by myself.
And so quickly, like the socializing just was far less important than, the other stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
I think we're simpatico there. You want to answer one or two more?
Yeah.
Pick a color. Here, I'll show you the kind of the color spectrum here so that you can see.
Let's go orange. I like orange.
Orange. Boom. When was the last time your life felt totally out of control?
Fucking yesterday. I mean, I don't. Yeah, it's like it goes in waves. Like, though I'm sober, I'm enjoying aspects of my life. I also do have PTSD from like some crazy shit that I did when I was out there using. And so sometimes things fluctuate and it can get very like intense or dark for me at times. So I probably have a few moments like every week where I'm just like, fuck this. Like, this is nuts.
I know for myself, the things that make me feel out of control now are not the things that made me feel out of control then. Back then, my life was unmanageable in the biblical sense of how we use that word in recovery. It was out of fucking control. Now, my challenges literally are just juggling a schedule that's too much and probably would be simplified by like investing 15 minutes into figuring out a better way to just like keep track of what I have to do. I mean, so much of it comes down to organization, and if you can't see what's going on that side of the room, but like, it's a mess, I could definitely stand to like update and just be better organized. And that would probably resolve a lot of the feelings of instability that I have,
Right. So I think that's a better way of saying it, like instability. Like, I mean, to answer that question, honestly, like I probably haven't been out of control since I was using.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like the external life, I've been able to manage things. The window dressing, it looks good.
Ever since I've known you, even to a fault, because I remember when we were younger and we would be hanging out and I would always want you to come and do stuff and you wouldn't, and like looking back on it now, like you've always been very disciplined so long as I've known you.
Yeah, part of it's discipline, part of it's fear, like I would get social anxiety. I don't want to do things. It's just like, wanting to have more control over my environment because I've been so out of control in the past. So yeah. I appreciate the flowers, but not all of it's flowers.
You got flowers on your water bottle there.
I do. It's not mine, but I really like it, so I take this around with me.
Whose is it?
I'm renting this house, so it's whatever. It's house stuff.
You're
Yeah.
renting a house
Renting a house, yeah.
just for fun?
When I moved back to Cleveland during the pandemic, I didn't want to, like, the market boomed here. Good for my friends, just out of principle, I wasn't going to pay what people wanted for like these homes in Cleveland. I didn't know which area I wanted to live. And so like every year or two, like I moved to a different area in the city and to see how am I liking it. And I like it, but I don't know. I might move back to California. I was in SoCal for like 5 weeks, 6 weeks, like last year, like in San Diego. I was thinking about it.
Dude, if you
Yeah,
moved down
I
to
don't
San Diego, that'd be awesome.
Right? Yeah. I want the sunshine.
I mean, I'll say this. Part of the thing that makes my life challenging, not that I live a challenging life, because really, in the grand scheme of things,
But the way we relate to it, we don't choose to make things more challenging. It just happens, and then we have to deal with it. It's like,
Yeah, I guess it's like a learned contempt for driving. You live in California, you're going to be driving, and like, especially where I live now, because I'm in the South Bay, I love being by the water. This is by design. I like being here, but like, I'm far away from other stuff,
Yeah.
There aren't really many places to live in Southern California that are like central, really, unless you want to make certain sacrifices and some other things. The quality of life down here is just, for me, it works really well. So I stay. But the flip side to that is most things are like 45 minutes away, if not more. So like, yeah, there's just the amount of time I spend driving in a car.
Hate it. It's awful. Everything's like New York. But everything took a while in New York too. Like we'd just be on the subway or walking.
Subway is different though. Subway, you can read. Subway, you're interacting with other humans. You're making eyes at people. Like there's definitely stuff.
You're watching a show. Something's happening.
Yeah. In the car, you're just in the car. Like that's kind of it. And or I don't know, the car. It's again, it has pros and cons. It just depends on what you are into.
Dude, I remember when we were living in Ridgewood. It may have been Bushwick. It was Memorial Day. I'm on the L train, and all of a sudden I'm just sitting there like I'm reading something, and I see this group of kids running. They're like, "He's got a machete. He's got a gun." And I'm just like, what? And all of a sudden I see this guy with the machete and with the gun chase after these other people. I'm like, oh my fucking God. I'm like, Andrew, you are not a hero. And I just like hid in my book until it stopped. And then everyone just cleared out.
That's so funny. You always had weirder experiences than me. And I remember being freaked out by some of the stuff that you would say, but then like I'd be walking around and have no issues at all. So I don't know.
I wish. It's fun stories to tell, but not fun to have experienced.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm glad I didn't ever have to actually deal with it. I do remember when we first moved into that Ridgewood apartment and there was a shooting across the street, like within the first like 2 weeks. And I remember walking down the stairs because I didn't hear it because I had like 2 air conditioners going on because it was so hot. Yeah. I didn't hear the shooting. Come downstairs. There's like 5, just like Boulder fucking NYPD and NYFD. They're just like these huge people. They're just like, "Do you hear anything last night?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, I don't know. There was
somebody was shot. Did you see anything? They was shot.
Yeah, I know. Then this guy was like, "What, did you just move in?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Lots of luck." Lots of luck.
Yeah.
Thanks. A vote of confidence. Yeah. But it was so cheap.
It was at the time. Now I'm sure they call that East Williamsburg now. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the last time that I was in Bushwick, it kind of bummed me out. And I think the only reason that it bummed me out was because it wasn't what I remembered, like it's just developed into something completely different. And you can lament the changing of how metropolitan cities in America have changed. It is what it is. It's just different.
It's not what it used to be.
It's not what it used to be, but what it used to be is somewhere else now. It's like things don't really change.
Right. Yeah.
Just get more expensive.
Right.
Here, let me throw another one at you. Pick a color.
All right. Yellow.
Yellow.
They call it mellow yellow. That's right.
Ooh. Okay. Well, this one is a little bit more specific to musicians, but let's see how you answer it. What gets you to play your best?
What gets me to play my best? Like Vault. Actually, heartbreak. I remember that like a person I was dating broke up, and I wanted to get her back. And so all I did day in, day out, I am practicing, I'm doing my scales, I'm writing, I'm doing whatever I could to make the best song ever. Didn't work and wasn't that great of a song. However, like the amount of effort I was putting in, like I don't think I've ever practiced that much in my life.
The practicing is a really interesting thing. I think this is an interesting question because it's so hard to be truly objective about what your best playing is, and just like how you feel when you're playing. I remember a couple of months ago I was doing a gig. There was this girl there who came to see the singer. This is somebody who essentially cut ties with me when my using was really bad. And of course, I felt righteously upset by that. Like, we used to be friends. How could she do this? Blah, blah, blah. We've seen each other since, more or less, like, we're fine now. It's never really been addressed in any like specific way, which probably will need to happen and probably something that I'm going to have to do. But I also remember this is the first time that she had seen me play in a few years, because this girl is also a singer and we used to play together all the time. So she's there, she's hanging out, and she's watching me play. And I'm just like playing for my life, because again, it was that kind of righteous indignation mixed with like, I am better. Let me fucking prove it to you, And I get a text from somebody else who said, oh, it wasn't the person that I was playing for, but it was somebody else who was there, says, like, you're on fire tonight. Like, I heard you were on fire tonight. And I was just like, yeah, I know it. I was just like, I felt great. But I think that the interesting thing, and it's the same thing as what you're saying, the forces that kind of created this playing experience were not, oh, everything is great, I'm zen at one with the world, obla di obla da. It's like, I'm gonna get something. Like, you're fighting. It's the heartbreak. It's the fuck you. It's the like, let's do this.
Right. The determinism. I'm going to overcome this, and like it works.
Right.
But isn't there also like something like with musicians, like sometimes like the song you like the least is like their most popular or something like that?
I don't know. I don't know if it's worse song. I do think that in a lot of times what tends to happen is like the masterpiece songs, a lot of times those songs that resonate so quickly, they do get written in 10 minutes, or at least that initial like spark, and then maybe they go through a revision or something. But like, that's the kind of interesting thing about it, is like, oh, that wasn't, that was just one song I wrote that week, and for whatever reason, it's just, that's the one, yeah, that's kind of the thing, right? It's just like, write a lot, yeah.
It's amazing how that happens. I don't get it. Being a human being is fucking weird.
Being a human being is weird. Being an artist is even weirder.
I'm very fortunate to have like that ADHD brain where like I need to be doing different things, and like I'm never just settled. So I feel driven. And I also found in my field, unfortunately, there's a lot of ego, especially when you get to like the doctorate level. Like, I diagnose and yada yada. People come up with all their different methods and shit like that, and they're married to their method more so than trying to be helpful to the individual.
You should see what it's like being a doctor of music.
You can only imagine. I mean, my heart goes out to them. It's like that, to be that kind of asshole or like whatever at the expense of others, like whatever suffering's going on inside you to do that. You hurt people. But like, I do this kind of stuff, and not to sit on my like, to be all self-righteous, but like, therapy's expensive. It might not work. It takes a long fucking time, and we need inventive ways to help others, especially with the current administration. Like, services are just continuing to get cut, and there needs to be ways that people can rely on the community and themselves to get
Yeah.
Bye.
Answer one more and then I'll let you go.
Blue.
Which color?
There's two blues.
Yeah, there's
dark blue.
Dark blue?
Dark blue.
Here,
Yeah, let's go dark.
Right here. Woo, Drew Bear.
Okay.
How do you feel if you eat too much?
Terrible.
You know, some people don't really seem to have that problem.
I tend not to eat too much anymore. Like that is where I'm more disciplined. Either depends on what I eat. If I'm eating something that's not healthy, I'll feel bad about it. So that's terrible.
How do you determine healthy? I'm just curious what that means for you.
I have days, or I give myself allowances. Like, again, consumption. Food is our fuel, and what we put in our bodies definitely affects our mind and our emotions. With that said, food is also our mental emotional health is like, community, like eating from different cultures, knowing like there's so many different aspects of it. So when you're eating something that's fried, that's okay if it's not all the time. That's like drugs aren't bad. It's a relationship to drugs. If you use them every once in a while for different purposes, it's fine. It's when it becomes chronic.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes an issue. So yeah, usually
I had to redetermine my what I thought was healthy or not. That's why I'm sort of curious to ask that question because of what you're saying, because moderation is food addiction is, you have to treat it differently than drug addiction.
Right. Because you have to eat.
You have to eat. And you're not always going to be able to eat healthy. And even then it's like, well, what is healthy? Because a lot of different people have different criteria for what they need, actually. One of the last people that I spoke with, his problem throughout his whole life was that he was always underweight, so what's healthy to you or me? I mean, is it just about nutrient density? Is it just about, I won't allow myself to eat dairy because it gives me gas? I don't know. Healthy means different things to different people. And so I think what I used to think was healthy, when I look back on it now, it was kind of meaningless. It was just like what I thought made me healthy. But then it's like, well, again, like you said, all food, it's not like eating a chicken wing is less fuel than eating a piece of broccoli. They're just different, and they both have different things to offer. And frankly, if you eat too much of either, you're going to have issues.
I don't know. I mean, what I do know is like I like to eat happy animals or animals that had something, because I think there's something there, even though I don't all the time. I like to eat things that are more natural or whole foods, like things that, not that GMOs are bad. So just because something's been genetically modified doesn't make it bad.
Everything's
I don't know.
Modified, and
I know. This is delved into a whole nother thing. Like
I know.
I just try to limit the amount of sugar I take. I try to eat things that make me feel good and happy when I eat them. Like,
I'm like this close to giving up meat again too, just because I just see these fucking cows and pigs on Instagram and I love them.
Yeah.
I think I look at my dog, I'm like, I wouldn't eat Sherlock. Would I eat a fish? Yeah.
Because they don't. It's because, like Kurt Cobain said, fish don't have any feelings.
They don't feel anything.
Yeah, they don't feel.
Would I eat a chicken?
Dolphins? I don't know.
Probably, I'd still eat a chicken. No, I don't know. I mean, but no. The reason I'm saying this, and most of that was joke, because really, at this point, the only meat that I do eat with any regularity is chicken breast that I steam, and it's just like purely there to serve a nutritional purpose and nothing more. It's not an enjoyable part of my diet. It's just I do it to eat it because it fills me up and it's like super clean protein.
Why don't you could season it up a little bit? Like, are you just trying to make yourself suffer there? Like, I think chicken breast on its own is just terrible. It's dry. There's not much flavor to it. Like, eat a fucking leg. Like, I don't get it. Jesus, this sadist over here.
No. It's
like I make myself suffer by me. Like I really got to feel the pain of the animal here.
No. There is a function to it. There is a method.
Yeah.
Madness. Yeah, I steam up a bunch of it, and then it's in the fridge, and it's easy to add it on to like a salad or a tortilla or anything. And it gets seasoned.
Oh, it gets seasoned later. Okay,
Yeah,
so it's not just like I eat this like very dry, unflavorful chicken breast.
No, I'll just say no.
Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah. Jesus.
Or I'll put like some barbecue sauce on it or something.
Yeah, barbecue. That's a good alternative.
Yeah. No, it's great. All right, good. So we got to the bottom of that.
Good. Yeah.
Oh, man, this has been great.
Yeah. Dude, it's like just weird after all these years because we fell out of touch like for years until you came into town.
Because I started doing drugs again.
That's true.
I'll tell you this, just to kind of wrap up what we were talking about before. For as horrible as that time was, going back out and kind of starting with the beginning of experimenting with drinking and drugs again, all the way to the end, the question that I would have never really had an answer to, which is, am I really an alcoholic? Am I really an addict? Like, I know now. Like the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And if it was worth it only for that, like, cool, good, mission accomplished.
Exactly.
Yeah,
no, it's like I can relate to what you're saying, and then also like just seeing how addicted I've gotten to just most things outside of drugs and alcohol. I could say without a doubt, I'm like, yeah, if I go back to that shit, it's a high likelihood.
Brother, thanks for doing it. Oh, there's one more thing you have to do. I started doing. You have to look at the camera and you have to say, I put my pants on one leg at a time.
I put my pants on one leg at a time.
That's incredible. Thank you. I can't wait to get into this.
Put your pants on one leg at a time.